The massive council chamber floated in the darkness of space, orbiting the bright planet below. Inside, 12 different alien species sat in their designated sections, each one stranger than the last. Some had scales that glimmered under the artificial lights. Others floated in tanks filled with purple liquid. A few looked almost like giant insects, their many eyes watching everything at once. At the center of the room, a holographic display showed a small blue planet, Earth, the home of humanity. Commander Zekthor stood tall, his gray scales catching the light as he moved. He was a Krell, one of the strongest warrior species in the known galaxy. His people had bones made of a silicon compound that could withstand impacts that would shatter steel. He looked down at the data scrolling across his tablet and shook his massive head. "These humans," he said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "They have no natural armor, no venom glands, no enhanced muscle density. Look at these numbers. Their bones break under pressure that would barely tickle a Krell child." Whisper of Dawn drifted closer to examine the data. She was an ethereal, a species that looked like flowing light given barely solid form. She had served as a medical officer for 300 cycles and had seen many species. "The medical data is concerning," she said, her voice like wind through crystals. "They are vulnerable to thousands of diseases. They require a very specific temperature range to survive. Too hot, they die. Too cold, they die. Their atmosphere must be exactly correct or they suffocate." An insectoid council member clicked its mandibles. "They also require water constantly. Without it for just a few days, they perish, and their skin offers no protection at all. A simple blade can pierce it." Another alien spoke up, this one covered in thick fur. "Their gestation period for offspring is dangerously long, and their young are helpless for years. Most of our species have independent young within weeks or months. Human children cannot even walk for a full year." Zekthor gestured to the viewing screen where the human delegation waited in another room. 5 humans sat there wearing their formal suits. They looked small, fragile, like they might break if someone spoke too loudly. "I do not understand why we are even considering their application for Galactic Council membership." The council leader, an ancient being whose species had been traveling the stars for millennia, raised one thin appendage. "Because they asked. And because our laws state that any species capable of faster than light travel may apply. They have built the engines. They have come to us. We must give them the standard choice. But what can they offer us?" Zekthor demanded. "Every member species contributes to our galactic defense force. What military value could these fragile creatures possibly provide?" "They will break in the first battle. Then we assign them to support roles," suggested another council member. "Medical staff, engineers, logistics, they need not fight on the front lines." The council leader nodded slowly. "A reasonable compromise. Bring them in." The doors opened with a soft hiss. Ambassador Lisa Chen walked in first, followed by her team. She was a small woman by human standards, barely reaching 160 centimeters in height. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her dark eyes took in the council chamber with careful observation. Behind her walked General Marcus Stone, Colonel Patricia Hayes, and 2 advisors. Ambassador Chen bowed respectfully. "Honored Council, thank you for seeing us." "We have reviewed your application," the council leader said. "Earth is an interesting world. Your species has achieved much in a short time. But we have concerns." "We understand," Chen replied smoothly. "We know we are different from the species already represented here." "Different is acceptable," Zekthor interrupted, his tone sharp. "Weak is not. Every species in this council contributes military forces to our collective defense. The galaxy is not a safe place. The Devourers still raid outer colonies. The Void Collective grows bolder. We need warriors, not crystal statues that shatter at the first touch." Ambassador Chen's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. General Stone shifted slightly behind her, and those paying attention might have noticed the small smile that crossed his weathered face. "We understand the requirement," Chen said carefully. "Humanity is prepared to contribute to the Galactic Defense Force." This caused some surprise among the council members. Whisper of Dawn floated forward. "Ambassador, please understand. Military service is dangerous. Your species profile suggests you are highly vulnerable to injury and environmental hazards. We would be sending your people into situations where they might not survive. Are you certain?" "Completely certain," Chen replied without hesitation. The council members exchanged glances, their various forms of communication passing between them. Finally, the council leader spoke. Very well. We will grant Earth provisional membership in the Galactic Council. In return, humanity will provide military personnel to serve in the Galactic Defense Force. Given your biological limitations, we will assign human personnel to support roles: medical, engineering, logistics, and communication positions. With respect, General Stone spoke up, his voice gravelly from decades of command. We would prefer our people be given the same opportunities as any other species. If other species serve in combat roles, we request the same. Zekthor laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Human, I have read your planet's history. You fight wars among yourselves with primitive chemical weapons and metal projectiles. You have never faced a devourer assault, where the enemy tears through reinforced positions like they are paper. You have never held a line against Void Collective Shadow soldiers. Your people would not last one battle. Then let us try, Stone said simply. The council leader considered this. It is their choice, Commander Zekthor. If they wish to prove themselves in combat, we will allow it. But, he turned to Chen, understand that we cannot make exceptions for human fragility. The training will not be easier. The deployments will not be safer. If your people cannot perform, they will wash out like any other failed recruit. Understood and accepted, Chen said. Very well. The council leader gestured, and holographic documents appeared in the air. Sign here, and Earth becomes the newest member of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Chen stepped forward and placed her hand on the interface. Her signature appeared in glowing letters, followed by the other human delegates. When it was done, the council leader nodded. Welcome to the galactic community, humanity. May your species find prosperity among the stars. As the human delegation was escorted out, Zekthor turned to Whisper of Dawn. Start preparing medical facilities for human casualties. With their fragility, we will need them. Already done, she replied quietly, watching the humans leave. Something about the way they walked, the way they held themselves, struck her as unusual. They did not move like beings who knew they were fragile. They moved with confidence, purpose. Did you see the general's face when I called them weak? Zekthor asked with amusement. I did, Whisper of Dawn said. He smiled. Fear response probably. Humans smile when stressed. I read that in the cultural briefing. Perhaps, Whisper of Dawn said, though she was not convinced. She had studied enough species to recognize the difference between a fear response and something else entirely. That smile had not been fear. It had been something that made her light form flicker with uncertainty. It had been anticipation. In the corridor outside, General Stone walked beside Ambassador Chen. They think we're going to break, he said quietly. They do, Chen confirmed. Should we have warned them? Chen smiled. The same small smile that had crossed Stone's face earlier. Where would be the fun in that, General? Besides, some lessons are better learned through experience. Behind them, Colonel Hayes chuckled. Those poor aliens have no idea what they just signed up for. No, Chen agreed, thinking of humanity's long history of survival against impossible odds. They really don't. The transport ship descended through the purple atmosphere of the training world, designated as Forward Operating Base Arcturus. Inside the troop compartment, Sergeant Mike Reeves sat with 49 other human volunteers. None of them spoke much. They had all been briefed on what to expect. The loading ramp dropped and heat rolled into the compartment like a physical wave. Reeves stood and led his people out into the harsh sunlight. The training base stretched before them, a collection of low buildings and obstacle courses that looked brutal even from a distance. Waiting for them was the largest being Reeves had ever seen. Drill instructor Krazoth stood 3 meters tall, his reptilian body covered in thick scales that looked like they could stop bullets. His eyes were yellow with vertical slits for pupils, and when he opened his mouth to speak, rows of sharp teeth gleamed. Humans, Krazoth's voice boomed across the landing pad. I am Drill Instructor Krazoth. For the next 12 weeks, you belong to me. I have trained 73 different species. I have seen the strong and the weak. I have seen warriors and cowards. He walked closer, his massive feet making the ground tremble slightly. You look like you would snap in a stiff breeze. Reeves kept his face neutral. He had dealt with drill instructors before. This was all part of the process. You will be integrated with recruits from other species, Krazoth continued. You will train together, eat together, and suffer together. Those who cannot keep up will be sent home. Do you understand? Yes, drill instructor. The humans shouted in unison. Krazoth's eyes narrowed. We shall see. Move to barracks section 7. Your training begins at dawn. The barracks were designed for multiple species with different sleeping arrangements for different biological needs. The humans were given a section with simple bunks. As they settled in, other recruits arrived. A group of krill like Krazoth, their bodies built like tanks, several ethereals who floated rather than walked, insectoid beings whose names Reeves could not pronounce. A few others he did not recognize at all. Private Maria Torres dropped onto the bunk next to Reeves. Did you see the size of that drill instructor? He could step on us, probably, Reeves agreed. Don't give him a reason to. That night, the different species sized each other up in the mess hall. The krill ate massive quantities of mineral-based foods. The ethereals absorbed some kind of energy directly from charged plates. The humans ate their rations quietly, aware of the stares they were getting. One of the krill recruits, a young male named Thokmar, approached the human table. You are the humans? The fragile ones? Reeves looked up. We're humans, yes. I heard your bones break easily. Is this true? They can break, Reeves said carefully. With enough force, anything breaks, Thokmar huffed, steam coming from his nostrils. Krill bones do not break. We are strong. You. He looked the humans up and down. You look like younglings. How will you survive training? I guess we'll find out, Torres said with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Dawn came early. The recruits were roused from sleep and assembled on the main training ground. Krazoth stood before them, looking far too alert for someone who had probably slept as little as they had. Today we begin with a simple exercise, he announced. A run, 20 kilometers, full gear. You have 4 hours. The recruits moved to collect their gear, combat packs, weighted to simulate equipment they would carry in the field. For the humans, this meant about 20 kilograms. For the krill, nearly 50. Though they barely seemed to notice the weight. The run began. The krill and several other strong species took off at a sprint, their powerful legs eating up the distance. The humans settled into a steady jog, not fast, but consistent. The ethereals floated along using less energy than anyone else. The insectoid species had an unusual hopping gait that covered ground quickly. By the 5th kilometer, the fastest runners were still far ahead. By the 10th, some of them were slowing down. The krill were built for short bursts of incredible strength, but sustained effort in the heat was taking its toll. Reeves could see Thokmar ahead, his pace faltering. The humans maintained their steady jog. Reeves had trained for marathons back on Earth. So had many of the others. This was hard, but it was not impossible. By kilometer 15, the landscape had changed dramatically. The krill were walking now, their massive bodies overheating in the sun. The insectoid species had stopped entirely, their biology requiring rest periods they could not skip. Only the ethereals seemed unaffected, but they had to maintain concentration to keep floating. And even that had its limits. The humans kept running. Krazoth watched from his observation vehicle, his tablet showing the positions of all recruits. He stared at the cluster of blue dots representing humans. They had not stopped, not once. Their pace had not changed significantly in 15 kilometers. Impossible, he muttered. Check the human tracking devices. They must be malfunctioning. His assistant, a small furry being, checked the systems. All devices functioning normally, drill instructor. The humans are simply still running. At the 20-kilometer mark, Reeves crossed the finish line. His shirt was soaked with sweat and his legs burned, but he was still moving. Behind him came Torres, then Corporal David Jackson, then the rest of the human contingent. All 50 humans finished within 15 minutes of each other. Behind them, aliens were still struggling to reach the finish line. Thokmar collapsed just past the marker, his body temperature dangerously high. Krell medics rushed to cool him down. Krazoth approached the humans, who were now stretching and drinking water. They looked tired, but they were not collapsed. They were not being treated by medics. They were simply recovering. How? Krazoth asked Reeves directly. The Krell are stronger than you. How did you outlast them? Reeves took another drink of water before answering. Strength and endurance are different things, drill instructor. We might not be the strongest, but we can keep going. For how long? Reeves smiled, a genuine smile this time. Want to find out? The training continued. They learned weapon systems, combat tactics, survival skills. But it was the endurance exercises that kept surprising everyone. A 72-hour combat simulation left most species unable to function after 40 hours. The humans kept going, operating on catnaps and sheer determination. During hand-to-hand combat training in Week 7, something happened that changed everything. Corporal Jackson was sparring with a Krell recruit. The alien was stronger, and during a grappling exchange, Jackson's shoulder was forced from its socket with an audible pop. The Krell backed away immediately, horrified. Dislocations were serious injuries for most species, requiring immediate medical intervention. Kryzoth was already calling for medics. Jackson looked down at his dislocated shoulder, grimaced, and said, "Hold on." He braced himself against a wall, positioned his arm, and with a sharp movement and a grunt of pain, popped his shoulder back into place. The training ground went silent. Every alien present stared at Jackson in shock. "Can we continue, drill instructor?" Jackson asked, rolling his shoulder and wincing. You are injured," Kryzoth said, his voice uncertain for the first time. "It's been popped back in," Jackson said. "I should ice it and keep it immobilized for a few days, but I can still train." Whisper of Dawn arrived with the medical team. She had been assigned to this base specifically to monitor the humans. She scanned Jackson with her instruments, her light form flickering in distress. "You should be unconscious from pain," she said. "The nerve damage alone should be debilitating." "It hurts," Jackson admitted. "But I've had worse." "You have had worse than this? When?" "Broke my leg in 3 places during a training accident back home. Tore my ACL playing football. Got shot once, that was not fun. This is just a dislocation." Whisper of Dawn spent the next 3 days running tests on human pain tolerance, injury response, and recovery rates. What she found disturbed her understanding of biology. Humans could function through injuries that would incapacitate other species. They healed faster than expected. Their psychological response to pain was fundamentally different. She wrote in her report, "Humans do not simply endure pain. They acknowledge it, categorize it, and continue operating despite it. This is not normal biological behavior. This is something else." In the barracks that night, the alien recruits gathered around the humans. Thokmar sat near Reeves, his earlier arrogance gone. "I do not understand your species," the Krell said quietly. "You are not strong like us, but you do not break. How?" Reeves thought about it. "My people have a saying. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We come from a world that tried very hard to kill us. Ice ages, predators, diseases, natural disasters. We survived all of it, not because we were the strongest or the fastest. We survived because we refused to give up." Torres added, "We're persistence hunters. Back on Earth before technology, we hunted by chasing animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. We couldn't outrun them in a sprint, but we could outlast them. We always could." The alien recruits absorbed this information in silence. They had judged humans by the wrong standards. They had looked for armor and found skin. They had looked for strength and found endurance. They had expected fragility and found something that scared them more than they wanted to admit. Creatures that simply refused to stop, no matter what. The alert sirens woke them at 0300 hours. Reeves was on his feet instantly, years of military training taking over. Around him, the other recruits scrambled to their stations with varying degrees of speed. The humans were dressed and armed in under 5 minutes. Some of the other species took longer. Kryzoth's voice boomed through the barracks speakers. "All recruits to the briefing hall. This is not a drill. Move." The briefing hall was packed with bodies of all shapes and sizes. At the front, a holographic display showed a planet spinning slowly. Commander Zekthor stood beside it, his expression grim. "The Devourers have launched a surprise attack on the colony world of Kepler 4482b, Zekthor announced. 3,000 colonists are trapped. The nearest full military response is 18 hours away. This base is the closest asset. We are deploying immediately." A murmur went through the assembled recruits. The Devourers were not a training exercise. They were real enemies, violent and ruthless, a hive mind species that consumed everything in their path. "All recruit units will deploy under the command of veteran officers," Zekthor continued. "Your job is to hold defensive positions until the main fleet arrives. Transport ships leave in 30 minutes. Collect your combat gear and prepare for drop." The humans moved as a unit to the armory. Real weapons this time, not training equipment. Reeves checked his rifle, a Galactic Defense Force standard-issue plasma weapon. It felt lighter than the old firearms he had trained with on Earth, but the principle was the same. Point and shoot. Torres appeared beside him, her face set with determination. First real fight. Yep, Reeves confirmed, checking his ammunition supply. You scared? Terrified. You? Same, but we've got a job to do. Jackson joined them, his shoulder fully healed now. Heard the Devourers don't take prisoners. They just eat you. Thanks for that mental image, Torres said dryly. The transport ships were massive, designed to carry multiple species with different environmental needs. The humans were loaded into a section with the Krell and several other species. As they lifted off, Thokmar sat beside Reeves, his scales darker than usual with stress. I have never fought in actual combat, the Krell admitted quietly. Neither have we, Reeves said. But we trained for this. Trust your training, watch your squad's back, and keep moving forward. The Devourers are fearsome. I have heard stories. So am I, Reeves said simply. So are all of us. They're about to find that out. The descent to Kepler 442b was rough. Atmospheric turbulence shook the transport, and several recruits looked like they might be sick. The humans remained calm, checking weapons and reviewing tactical data on their tablets. They landed in a defensive perimeter around the colony's main settlement. The colonists, a mix of species, were being evacuated to the transport ships. The military forces were setting up firing positions and barriers. Commander Zekthor assigned positions. The humans were placed on the eastern flank, considered the least likely approach for the enemy. They were given a section of defensive wall to hold, with Krell veterans on their flanks. Remember, Zekthor said, his voice carrying across the position, if the fighting becomes too intense, signal for relief. There is no shame in acknowledging your limits. Reeves nodded but said nothing. They settled into their positions and waited. The Devourers came at dusk. They looked like a nightmare made flesh, insectoid bodies as large as vehicles moving with terrifying speed on too many legs. They had mandibles that could cut through steel, and they screamed as they attacked, a sound that made every instinct scream to run. Hold the line, Reeves shouted, opening fire. His plasma rifle spat bolts of superheated energy, and the first Devourer went down. But there were dozens more behind it. The humans fired in controlled bursts, just like training. The eastern wall lit up with weapons fire. Devourers fell, but more kept coming. The wave seemed endless. 6 hours into the battle, the Krell units on the flanks rotated out for rest. They were exhausted, their strength-based biology not designed for sustained combat. Relief units took their place. Human unit, do you require relief? Came the call over the radio. Reeves was covered in dirt and sweat. His arms ached from holding his rifle, but his ammunition was still good, and his people were still fighting. Negative. Send us more ammunition instead. There was a pause. Repeat your last? We don't need relief. We need more ammunition. Our position is stable. 12 hours into the battle, Torres started singing. It was an old military marching song from Earth. Something about soldiers and glory. The other humans picked it up, their voices carrying across the defensive position even as they fired their weapons. In the command center, Zekthor stared at the monitors showing the human position. Are they singing? He asked his aide in disbelief. Yes, Commander. It appears to be a cultural response to stress. They are not stressed. They are in combat! But even as he said it, Zekthor could see the data. The human position had not wavered. They had not requested relief. They had not lost a single meter of ground. At hour 18, the Devourers concentrated their forces on the eastern flank, trying to break through what they perceived as the weak point. Hundreds of the creatures charged the human position in a coordinated assault. This is it, Jackson shouted. Don't let them through. The humans poured fire into the advancing horde. Devourers died by the dozens, but still they came. The creatures reached the wall and began climbing. Close combat became necessary. Jackson's rifle ran dry. Without hesitation, he drew his combat knife and met the first Devourer that crested the wall. The creature's claw tore through his armor and into his chest, breaking ribs. Jackson felt the snap, felt the pain explode through his body, but he did not stop. He drove his knife into the creature's eye and pushed it back off the wall. Jackson's hit, Torres shouted. I'm fine. Jackson gasped, though blood was spreading across his chest. Keep firing. Whisper of Dawn, monitoring medical readouts from the command center, saw Jackson's vital signs and transmitted immediately. Corporal Jackson has multiple fractured ribs and a collapsed lung. He should be unconscious or dying. On the eastern wall, Jackson reloaded his rifle with shaking hands and kept firing. Each breath was agony, but he had air in his other lung. That was enough. The assault lasted another 2 hours before the Devourers finally broke. They retreated into the darkness, leaving hundreds of their dead behind. The human position stood, battered but unbroken. Reeves did a quick count. All 50 humans were still on their feet, though many were wounded. Jackson was the worst, but even he refused medical evacuation until the position was fully secured. Human unit, Zekthor's voice came over the radio. Status report. Position secure, Commander, Reeves replied. No ground lost. We have casualties but no fatalities. Requesting ammunition resupply and medical support for wounded. There was a long silence. Then, you held for 36 hours without relief? Yes, Commander. Is that a problem? Another pause. No, Sergeant. That is not a problem. Medical teams are en route. Well done. When the medical teams arrived, Whisper of Dawn went directly to Jackson. He was sitting against the wall, his breathing shallow and painful. She scanned him immediately. How are you alive? She asked, her light form flickering with confusion. You have been fighting for 2 hours with a collapsed lung and broken ribs. This should not be possible. Jackson managed a weak smile. Honestly, I've had worse hangovers. At least I remember this pain. You are joking. Why are you joking? Because if I don't laugh, I'll scream. And screaming hurts more. Whisper of Dawn worked on him in silence, using advanced medical technology to stabilize his injuries. As she worked, she thought about everything she had observed. Humans had fought for 36 continuous hours. They had sustained injuries that would have removed any other species from combat. And they had held their position without losing a single meter. The main fleet arrived 6 hours later. The Devourers were driven off the planet entirely. In the aftermath, Commander Zekthor walked the defensive lines, inspecting the positions. When he reached the eastern wall, he stopped. The human position showed signs of the heaviest fighting. Scorch marks, damaged barriers, and the bodies of dozens of Devourers piled against the wall. But the wall itself had not been breached. He found Reeves supervising the cleanup. The sergeant looked exhausted but alert. Sergeant Reeves. Commander, Reeves acknowledged. I owe you an apology, Zekthor said, the words difficult but necessary. I thought your species was too fragile for combat. I was wrong. With respect, Commander, you weren't entirely wrong. We are fragile. Our bones break, our skin tears, and we don't have natural armor. But being fragile and being weak are not the same thing. Zekthor considered this. Explain. We break, yes. But we don't stop. That's the difference. A Krell might not break as easily as a human, but when they reach their limit, they're done. Humans? We hit our limit and then find a way to keep going anyway. We've been doing it for thousands of years. I have watched your species closely during this deployment, Zekthor said. I have seen things I did not think possible. Corporal Jackson fought with a collapsed lung. Private Torres continued operating after being thrown against a wall hard enough to crack her helmet. You yourself have not slept in 36 hours but show no signs of decreased function. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the Galactic Defense Force looked very different. Human units were now deployed across 15 different sectors, and stories about them spread through the military like wildfire. There was the tale of the Marathon Men of Rigel 7, where a human squad pursued an enemy force for 6 straight days across hostile terrain without stopping. The enemy commander had eventually surrendered, not because he was cornered, but because he was exhausted and the humans just kept coming. There was the legend of Sergeant Rachel Williams, who lost her arm to a devourer blade during combat. Security footage showed her picking up the severed limb and using it to beat the devourer unconscious before calmly applying a tourniquet to her stump and returning to formation. The phrase human tenacity had entered military vocabulary. When someone refused to quit despite impossible odds, soldiers would say they were pulling a human. In the Galactic Defense Force headquarters, a meeting was taking place that would change human involvement in the war effort forever. Commander Zekthor stood before the High Command Council, presenting his proposal. For 200 cycles, we have maintained an elite special operations unit, he said. The best warriors from each species, handling missions deemed too dangerous for standard forces. I propose we add human personnel to this unit. One of the council members, a four-armed being from a heavy gravity world, leaned forward. The Galactic Spec Ops teams handle the most extreme missions. Infiltration of enemy strongholds, sabotage operations in hostile environments, extraction of critical assets from impossible situations. You believe humans are suitable? I believe they are essential, Zekthor replied. He brought up a series of tactical displays. Humans have proven they excel in exactly the conditions that challenge our special operations teams most. Sustained operations without rest, functioning despite injuries, operating in environments hostile to most species. They are persistence specialists. Another council member spoke, this one an ethereal like whisper of dawn. The mortality rate for Spec Ops missions is 43%. Are you prepared to accept human casualties at that level? I believe the casualty rate will decrease with human involvement, not increase, Zekthor said. But yes, the humans I have recommended understand the risks. They volunteered. The council deliberated for 3 hours before reaching a decision. The human candidates would be allowed to try out for the Spec Ops team. If they passed the selection process, they would be integrated into existing units. Among the human candidates selected was Captain Sarah Chen, daughter of Ambassador Lisa Chen. Sarah had distinguished herself in multiple combat deployments, and her tactical thinking had impressed senior commanders. She was smaller than most humans in the military, standing only 165 centimeters tall, but her performance scores were exceptional. She arrived at the Special Operations Training Facility along with 2 other human candidates. The facility was located on a moon with higher than standard gravity, making every movement more difficult. The existing Spec Ops team waited for them in the briefing room. Zekthor was there, having transferred to Spec Ops Command. Whisper of Dawn floated nearby, now the team's primary medical officer. Krezoth, their former drill instructor, had also joined as a combat specialist. Welcome, Zekthor said. You will train with this team for the next 4 weeks. If you meet our standards, you will become permanent members. If not, you return to your regular units with no prejudice. The training was brutal. They practiced close-quarters combat in zero gravity, infiltration techniques in hostile environments, and survival scenarios that assumed everything would go wrong. The humans struggled with some aspects. Zero-gravity combat was completely outside their experience, and it took time to adapt. But in other areas, they excelled. A 3-day survival exercise in a toxic environment saw most team members relying heavily on environmental suits. The humans jury-rigged their equipment to reduce dependency on power systems, operating for longer periods with less support. During a night infiltration exercise, the team had to cross 20 kilometers of rough terrain without being detected by sensor drones. Most species needed light to operate effectively. The humans moved through the darkness with confidence. Their eyes adapted to low-light conditions that left others effectively blind. Captain Chen proved particularly adept at tactical planning. During a simulated hostage rescue, she proposed an approach that used the team's diverse abilities in combination, rather than trying to fit everyone into a single strategy. The mission was completed in record time with 0 simulated casualties. At the end of 4 weeks, all 3 human candidates passed selection. Chen was assigned to Zekthor's primary team, where she became the team's tactical planning specialist. Their first real mission came 2 weeks later. Intelligence reported that the Devourers had constructed a superweapon on the planet Thanatos 9. The weapon was capable of sterilizing an entire planet, turning it into a lifeless rock. It would be operational in 72 hours. Thanatos 9 was a death world. Surface temperature swung from 50 degrees below freezing at night to 60 degrees above boiling during the day. The atmosphere was toxic, filled with sulfur compounds that corroded most materials. Gravity was 30% higher than standard. No species could survive there without extensive environmental support. The mission briefing was grim. You will insert via high-altitude drop, the briefing officer explained. Make your way to the weapon facility, sabotage the primary systems, and extract to the pickup point. Expected time on ground is 18 hours. Projected casualty rate is 80%. Chen studied the planet data carefully. Something about it seemed familiar. She pulled up Earth's historical environmental data and compared it to Thanatos 9. Her eyes widened slightly. Sir, request permission to speak, she said. Granted, Captain. Thanatos 9's conditions are extreme by galactic standards, but they are not unprecedented. Earth went through similar conditions during our Hadean period, and humans have survived in extreme environments throughout our history. Death Valley on Earth reaches 54 degrees Celsius. The Danakil Depression has toxic gases. Humans have adapted to thin atmosphere at high altitudes. This planet is hostile but not impossible for us. Zekthor leaned forward with interest. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that humans may be able to operate on Thanatos 9 with minimal environmental support. Our temperature regulation through sweating is highly efficient. We can process toxins through our liver and kidneys that would kill other species. If we reduce our dependency on environmental suits, we become faster and more mobile. Whisper of Dawn's light form flickered. Captain Chen, the atmospheric conditions alone could sear your lungs. Could, Chen agreed. But humans have worked in chemical plants, mines, and industrial environments with similar hazards. We can use minimal respiratory protection instead of full environmental suits. It will be uncomfortable, but manageable. Krazoth made a rumbling sound. You propose to walk onto a death world with minimal protection? I propose we use our natural advantages, Chen replied. The environmental suits slow us down and require power. If we can operate without them, we complete the mission faster and have a better chance of survival. The plan was approved with significant hesitation. The team would carry full environmental suits but attempt to operate with reduced protection, relying on human adaptability to handle the hostile conditions. The drop onto Thanatos 9 was terrifying. The transport ship could not fully enter the atmosphere, so they literally fell from orbit in drop pods. The heat of re-entry was intense, and the impact when they hit the ground rattled everyone's bones. They emerged from the pods into a landscape that looked like hell. Red rocks, geysers of toxic steam, and a sun that beat down with physical force. The non-human team members immediately activated their full environmental suits. Chen and the other humans used minimal protection, respirators for the toxic atmosphere, heat-reflective clothing, and protective eyewear. They left the heavy environmental suits in the pods. This is insane, Thokmar said, his voice distorted through his suit's speakers. You will die out here. Maybe, Chen said, her voice clear despite the respirator. But we will be faster. Come on, we have a weapon to destroy. The first hour proved Chen right. The environmental suits were struggling. Power drain from temperature regulation was faster than expected. The humans moved easily, their bodies sweating to cool themselves, their lungs protected but not restricted. By hour 6, 2 team members had to switch to backup power cells for their suits. The humans were tired but functional. They reached the facility perimeter just as the sun set and the temperature plummeted. Now the cold became the problem. The humans started shivering immediately, their bodies burning energy to stay warm. But they adapted, using movement to generate heat, huddling together during brief rest periods to share body warmth. You are incredible, Whisper of Dawn said, watching Chen's vital signs. Your temperature regulation is the most efficient system I have ever seen. You should not be able to survive these temperature swings. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us in every way possible, Chen said simply. This is just another Tuesday. They infiltrated the facility by exploiting a weakness in the security sensors. 3 years after first contact, the Galactic Council chamber looked much the same as it always had. 12 species sat in their designated sections, the same holographic displays floating in the center. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Ambassador Lisa Chen now sat at the council table itself, not in a delegation pod. Earth had earned full membership status, and humanity's contributions to galactic defense had made them one of the most respected voices in military matters. Today's session was different. Another species had applied for council membership. The Qualine were small beings, barely a meter tall, with delicate features and pale blue skin. They came from a paradise world with perfect weather, abundant resources, and virtually no natural predators. Their technology was advanced, their culture peaceful. The council reviewed their application in silence. Finally, one member spoke. It was a Krell commander, younger than Zekthor but cut from the same mold. They look fragile, he said, echoing the words once used about humans. Ambassador Chen smiled slightly. It was a smile many in the council had learned to recognize. It meant someone was about to learn something important. Appearance can be deceiving, Chen said calmly. I suggest we give them the standard opportunity. If they wish to contribute to the Galactic Defense Force, let them try. Judge them by their actions, not their appearance. The Krell commander nodded slowly, remembering his own species' error in judgment. Agreed. Let us not repeat past mistakes. The Qualine were granted provisional membership, with the same requirement humanity had faced, contribution to the GDF. As they left the chamber, looking nervous but hopeful, Chen watched them go with the same expression she had worn 3 years ago. Later that day, Chen met with General Stone in his office at GDF headquarters. The general had aged in 3 years, more gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes. But he looked satisfied in a way he never had before. "The new recruitment numbers are impressive," Stone said, pulling up data on his display. "We have 50,000 humans serving in the GDF now, spread across 40 different sectors. Combat effectiveness ratings for units with human personnel have increased by 42%. The aliens are learning from us," Chen observed. "They are, and we are learning from them." Stone pulled up training footage showing mixed species units. Humans teaching aliens endurance techniques. Krell teaching humans close quarters combat with their superior strength. Ethereals sharing energy management strategies. "It is becoming a true unified force," Chen said. "That was always the goal," Stone nodded. "Command wants to expand the human training programs. They want human drill instructors at every major training facility." The phrase they used was "built human tough." It has become the standard to aspire to. There was a knock at the door. Sergeant Reeves entered, though his uniform now showed the rank insignia of a lieutenant. Behind him came Corporal Jackson, also promoted, his artificial arm moving with perfect precision. "You wanted to see us, General?" Reeves asked. "I did. Sit, please." Stone waited until they were settled. "You two have been selected for a new program. We are establishing the first galactic military academy on Earth. Human instructors will train mixed species, recruit classes in an environment specifically designed to push their limits. You want us to run boot camp for aliens on Earth?" Jackson asked, a grin spreading across his face. "Essentially, yes. Lieutenant Reeves, you will be the Academy's senior tactical instructor. Sergeant Jackson, you will handle advanced combat training. You will have a staff of 30 human instructors and advisors from other species." Reeves leaned back, considering. "It will be brutal. Earth is a harder environment than most species are prepared for." "That is the point," Stone said. "We want graduates who understand that survival is not about having the perfect conditions. It is about adapting to whatever conditions exist." "When do we start?" Reeves asked. 6 months. "The facility is being built in Colorado. Mountains, thin air, temperature extremes. We are calling it the Crucible." After the meeting, Reeves and Jackson walked through the headquarters building. The corridors were filled with beings from across the galaxy, all wearing the uniform of the Galactic Defense Force. Humans walked alongside Krell ethereals, and dozens of other species. "Never thought I would see this," Jackson said quietly. "When we first arrived, they treated us like we were made of glass." "We showed them different," Reeves replied. "We showed them what humans are really made of." Across the galaxy, the impact of humanity's integration into the GDF was evident everywhere. On the frontier world of Arcturus, now a major training facility, drill instructor Krazoth supervised a mixed species training company. His methods had changed, incorporating human-style endurance training alongside traditional strength exercises. "Pain is temporary," he roared at his exhausted recruits. "Pride is forever, again." The recruits, gasping and sweating, pushed themselves to complete another set of exercises. Among them, several humans ran alongside aliens twice their size, showing that determination mattered more than physical power. On the medical station orbiting Nexus Prime, Whisper of Dawn had become the galaxy's leading expert on comparative species biology. Her research on human physiology had revolutionized medical understanding across multiple fields. She was currently briefing a group of medical students from various species. "Humans taught us that we had been measuring survival all wrong," she explained, her light form pulsing with each word. "We looked for armor, for strength, for environmental adaptations. We never considered that the greatest adaptation might be the ability to adapt itself. Humans do not have one strategy for survival. They have thousands, and they can switch between them as conditions change." One of the students, a young ethereal, asked, "Is it true that humans can survive injuries that would kill most species?" "It is true," Whisper of Dawn confirmed. "But it is not just physical. Their psychological resilience is equally impressive. They have a phrase, 'What does not kill you makes you stronger.' For most species, this is metaphorical. For humans, it is literally true. They grow stronger from adversity." In the Special Operations Wing, Captain Sarah Chen prepared for another mission. Her team was now legendary, having completed 37 high-risk operations with 0 fatalities. The team's success rate was unprecedented. Zekthor, Now her second-in-command reviewed the mission parameters with her. The relationship between human and Krell had evolved from skepticism to deep mutual respect. Another Death World insertion, Zekthor observed. They keep sending us to impossible places. That is because we keep succeeding, Chen replied with a slight smile. We have become the specialists for missions no one else wants. You mean you have become the specialists? The rest of us just try to keep up. Chen looked at him seriously. We succeed because we work together. Your strength, Whisper's medical expertise, Krazoth's tactical skills, and yes, human endurance. None of us could do this alone. Still, Zekthor said, I have watched you walk onto planets that should kill you and come back alive. There is something about humans that defies logic. Not logic, Chen corrected. Just expectations. We come from a death world, Zekthor. Earth tried to kill us for millions of years. Ice ages, meteor strikes, supervolcanoes, plagues. We survived all of it. Not because we were the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. We survived because we never stopped trying to survive. The mission launched an hour later. It would be difficult, dangerous, and would push every team member to their limits. But they would succeed, because that was what they had trained to do. Back on Earth, at the site that would become the Crucible Academy, construction crews from multiple species worked together to build something unprecedented. A training facility specifically designed to produce soldiers capable of operating in the harshest conditions imaginable. Lieutenant Reeves stood on a ridge, looking down at the construction. Beside him, Sergeant Jackson pointed to various features. Obstacle course there, running trails through the mountains, survival training in the wilderness areas. It is going to be magnificent. It is going to break a lot of recruits, Reeves said. Those who break were not meant to be here. The ones who make it through will be the best soldiers in the galaxy. Human philosophy? Human experience. We know what works because we lived it. Now we share it. In the council chambers, Ambassador Chen stood before the assembly one more time. She had been asked to present a report on humanity's first 3 years in the Galactic Defense Force. When we first applied for membership, you called us fragile, she began. You saw our lack of natural armor, our environmental requirements, our biological vulnerabilities. You saw weakness, but you measured us by the wrong standards. She brought up a holographic display showing human soldiers in action across dozens of worlds. Humans are fragile. Our bones do break. Our skin does tear. We can be killed. But fragility is not the same as weakness. Glass is fragile, but it can still be strong. Steel is tough, but it can still break. The question is not what can destroy you. The question is what you do before you break. The display showed footage from Kepler 442b, from Thanatos 9, from countless battles and missions. Humans fighting, adapting, surviving, succeeding. We do not claim to be the strongest species. We do not claim to be the smartest or the most advanced.